Tourette's podcast is not a medical advice show. It's a show about experiences. In the course of that, we may talk about medications or therapies or stories from the doctor's office, but don't mistake any of that for medical advice or direction. It's not. Get that only from people or places licensed or certified to give it, not from a massively fun and action-packed podcast about our life experiences.
Totally get it.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to a new season of Tourette's podcast. It's been a bit, but we're back. This is Ben Brown.
This is Brittany Wolf.
And this is Jhonelle Bean.
And what are y'all doing here?
Well, we have the lovely opportunity to be co-hosts of the Tourette podcast.
Yeah.
I could not be more excited about this. Britney and Jhonelle, I reached out to y'all a while back because, there's been a little bit of a hiatus with Tourette's podcast. And we can get into that. That's fine. It's mainly health related with me. Things are good. Things are fine. But, had to kind of step away and reevaluate some things and continuing kind of that piece of it, and wanted to kind of give some new life to the podcast anyway and some new perspective and all that. So Britney and Jhonelle are two people who have been on the podcast before and have, first off, you have great individual stories about life with Tourette syndrome, but you're also very active with the community and a lot of people know you. And this is really, just y'all came to mind very quickly when I'm thinking of, who can take over Tourette's podcast or who would be ideal. So this is awesome. Thank you two so much for being here. This is great.
Thank you.
Yep. No, I'm incredibly excited. I was honored when you reached out, and I told you before, and I told Jhonelle before too, that when you told me Jhonelle was the other person you were talking about or thinking about doing it, I was so excited. I feel like when Jhonelle and I met virtually first, obviously, before we met at the conference, It was just like an instant friendship for us. Like, I feel like Jhonelle's almost, and I don't know if it sounds weird, so I apologize if I may weird you out. I almost feel like she's one of my closest friends, and it's so odd because it's an online friendship, but because then when we met at the conference, it wasn't,
it just confirmed it.
Yeah, it was we met before in person. It was we've known each other forever. So I was super bummed.
Same.
Yeah, I don't think I feel like in my mind, I've met both of you in person. When I said both of you are in the room with me, I'm being a little facetious. We're in the same digital room together, yes. But in my mind, I feel like I've met you in person before because I've known both of you for so long, just kind of online on a specific topic initially, but then kind of becoming friends after that. And I have to think twice about have I met you guys in person? This is, but that's whatever. This is, I love that we've kept in touch, and, I've been following the individual work that y'all have been doing. And I mean, I know you've been really busy when it comes to Tourette advocacy. I mean, it's apparent. And, so that's another good thing too about, having you guys come to the podcast and basically take it over, because you have so much perspective and connection with the community and obviously, lived experience, but also, know other people's lived experiences and how maybe yours relates to, how other Touretters have kind of navigated things. And it's cool to be that close to the community and be able to trade notes and kind of, you can enlighten yourself that way and all that. So other reasons why I think y'all are perfect for this. But, for this first episode of the new season, what should we do? What should we talk about?
Oh man. One thing that came to mind while we were just all talking about that, and you saying that it almost does feel like we have met in person, Ben, you and I, and you and Jhonelle. And I think that's because, and I think that's a good topic to touch on with all of us here, is that connection. That's a different connection that we don't necessarily have with other people in our lives. And I feel like that's why that's that beauty of social media. I always tell people that social media, it's a love-hate relationship with me. There's always the terrible people. I've been getting a lot more nasty comments more recently, but I think it's just that connection. It's that instant connection. And I think almost it's like And I'm speaking for me here, not trying to put words in other people's mouth, but it was like that longing, that connection that I was longing for, I think, most of my life that I didn't realize that I was longing for necessarily. Because I
Mhm.
always said when I went to ever since I went to the national or the conference with the Tourette Association, I didn't know that that part of me, like, almost still needed healed a little bit. Like, and I didn't even realize that was like a wound inside of me, I don't think, that I never got to be around people like me.
Right.
And then when I
Yeah.
went to that conference, it was like that little girl in me came out and was like, "Oh my goodness, this is what I wanted." When I was
Yeah.
like, little me was like, "Hey, we finally found our people."
Yeah.
And that's not to say, and I always just preface this because my family is the most supportive family in the world. And I feel like, especially my mom, and they listen to everything I do. It's not because of any of them. They loved me and supported me wholeheartedly my whole life. But it's just different when I spent all my childhood wondering why I never got to be around anybody like me. And I
Yeah.
think that's why that connection happened so, like, instantaneously almost.
Yeah. Yeah. I feel that. It's interesting because I went to Tourette conferences when I was a little kid, when I was like, like 6, 7, 8, 9 years old. And that was really important for me because growing up in the 1980s with Tourette syndrome was like, it was a really isolating thing, and there's no social media, no, you I did have a pen pal like later on, like writing handwritten letters in the mail and stuff like that, but and the Tourette Association actually hooked me up with that. But in general, I had no connection to the Tourette world, certainly not in my daily life or anything like that. So going to these conferences when I was a little kid, and also seeing adults who, kind of like, I liked them. They looked cool to me. They seemed like witty and smart and stuff like that. And they had Tourette syndrome. And it was being a little kid and getting those impressions from people who were kind of, linked to you in that way is really cool. But when I kind of locked up later on and stopped talking about Tourette and didn't tell my friends about it. Just, was like hiding that part of my life. I didn't want to be known as the guy with Tourette or whatever it was. But I felt like once I did, when Tourette's podcast started, and I forgot what year it was now, it was like 2018 or something like that. And Brittany, you were the first guest, I think. Actually, you were the first
Oh,
episode.
wow.
No,
No.
it was Maddie, but you were very early on. There was. I,
Yeah.
I think Maddie was the first, and then you were very, very early on. But you were one of the first people I reached out to when I decided to start re-exploring that side of myself, of Tourette. Like, what is the community like? What's the science like now? Like, what's changed since I was
Right.
paying attention to it when I was a kid, and I feel like I learned that just by talking, to you two and to others. I felt like I got to know myself a whole lot better as an adult. Um, I felt like a little bit more enlightened when I was a kid and I was in that context, but then kind of locking it away. Tourette is not going to be part of my life. And then
Mhm.
being like, well, Tourette's part of my life, whether I like it or not, I better find community. And once I found that community, I definitely, just almost like resolved a number of things
Yeah.
with myself, which was really cool. So same thing. It's just like, as soon as I start talking with y'all, and I know you guys have the same kind of rare frame of reference, I guess you could say, it becomes very easy to get close to one another and be
Yeah.
friends beyond just like, we don't have to just talk about Tourette syndrome. We could talk about the
Right.
other things that we're into too, but we have the same kind of angle on how we view things. And I think that kind of makes for fun
Yeah.
conversation.
There's just kind of like Brittany said, almost like some aspect of an instant connection when you meet somebody else and you're like, "Oh, you have like Tourette syndrome too, or you have a tic disorder too." And I feel like it also relieves so much pressure because I feel like when I'm meeting new people or around people that I haven't really, known or been around before, there's always, even though I try my best to just kind of, tick freely, if I don't necessarily need to suppress in a situation, like I feel like there's sometimes that I do, like if I'm at somebody's funeral, but just a general, location, I try to like subconsciously, suppress. And then if somebody says something like, "Oh, I have Tourette syndrome too," or "Oh," sometimes even like, "Oh, well, my brother growing up had that," then I kind of feel
Hmm.
like the shoulders kind of go down, like, "Oh, phew, okay."
Yeah.
A little bit
Right.
of release of tension that they already have that basic understanding that I don't have to sit there and go through, well, basically it's a condition where, and
Yes.
explain all of
Yeah.
that. It's just kind of, that part is already done for me.
It's that
Yeah.
weight off of your shoulders, and it's funny that you say that when you meet somebody and they're like, "Oh, so and so that I know has it, so I know about it." At my new job, every single person so far, it's the weirdest thing for me, has told me that they know somebody in their life or had somebody in their life that had Tourette syndrome. I'm like, this.
Wow.
And it's the smallest, like, place I've worked at, which is the
Hmm.
wilder thing, and I'm like, I feel so now, not to mention it's also filled with dogs every day, so my ticks are,
Yeah.
like, on a nice even keel because turns out checking dogs in and out of places just makes me super happy all day. But, who would have thought? You never would have guessed probably by taking one look at my social media that I'm obsessed with dogs. But, um, yeah, like my manager, her sister, I think she said, has a best friend that had it. One of the groomers there said that she had somebody in her life that had it. Another person that did work there said her boyfriend had Tourette syndrome. I'm like,
Wow.
it's like the mothership called me home.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. Not the
Yeah,
mothership.
it's it's I was talking about, the 1980s and how, isolating it felt back then because of the lack of, stuff like social media and easier ways to connect with people and find people. So I do have so many more connections with Tourette syndrome, with, just like you were saying, like strangers you meet and they're like, oh yeah, my cousin was diagnosed with that 2 years ago, where there are quicker, I guess, degrees of connection.
Yeah.
Um, and that's great. I will say, but and because it's still so awkward to, like, you want to
Mm.
advocate and you want people to be
Yes.
educated and you want people to know, and you want to, like,
Yeah.
I think it's a nice thing to think about, that like you could be sort of like their first like human interaction with someone with
Hmm.
Tourette, and you didn't give them the same impression that they already had in their mind or whatever it is.
Mhm.
Like that's a good thing you want to happen, but to be realistic, it still can be very awkward to explain to people.
Yeah.
And first off, you don't know if they have any connection to it. You don't
Right.
know what their impression of it is. It can be, a
Yeah.
very maybe extreme impression, and that extreme impression may accurately reflect the life of somebody with Tourette syndrome.
Right.
Um, but the sort of, I guess, sense of diversity with it is not quite there with people, and so it's awkward to kind of like walk that line and say, like, I know you think it's this, but it's also this, and like you don't want to kind of discount anybody else's experience by
Hmm.
explaining that, like, it's not exactly what you think, even though what you think does reflect the life of certain
Yeah.
people out there. And I guess, for example, some people think it is necessarily coprolalia, and
Mhm.
and so in explaining that, I'm not knocking coprolalia in any way whatsoever, or anybody's lived experience with it or anything like that.
Mhm.
But sometimes it is just the impression people have, and
Hmm.
not wanting to discount that, or say that that isn't Tourette syndrome or something, but also explain what your life is like with it, it can be super, super awkward.
Yeah.
And sometimes I know with people I work with, not everybody knows, but a few of them do. And I just kind of didn't bother with the whole, preamble of, I don't know what you think Tourette syndrome is, but here's my life with it. Instead, I've just kind of lived and just kind of worked alongside these people so they can just kind of, I'm just a person who has Tourette syndrome. They know for a fact that I
Yeah.
have Tourette syndrome, and I'm the impression that they have, or at least adding to the impression that they have of it. So it's really cool that it's more comfortable to start that conversation nowadays with social media, and with more diagnoses, as
Yeah.
understanding of Tourette syndrome kind of expands. And um, it's definitely a better world than it used to be, for sure. It's still awkward.
It's definitely,
Definitely.
yeah, it's awkward, and it's almost like a fine line that we walk, because it's interesting when you're saying that we're not try when I because I feel the same way sometimes when I'm explaining that I don't have coprolalia, but it's still real, like, because I wanna say it, but I also don't, like you said, I don't wanna knock it because I don't wanna be like, "Yeah, but only this many people have it," because I don't want it to seem like I think those people are insignificant, because 'cause they're
Right.
not. It's very real and it's very hard. But I just try to get help let people know, like, it's not just that, and it's like a fine line, because I
Hmm.
don't wanna, as far as offending goes, I absolutely never wanna offend anybody in my community, by that. So I always try to, like, anytime I talk about like that statistic, like, well, only 10 to 15% of people have it, I try to always have to be like, or I always want to be like, but it's still very real for them. Like, let's not forget about it. And so it's like this fine line. And then I don't know if you guys get this, but some or feel this way sometimes. I feel like sometimes when it gets brought up, maybe I haven't brought it up naturally, but it got brought up. And then I start ticking after that. But I
Mm-hmm.
wasn't maybe ticking very much before that, or I was masking more or hiding it more.
Yeah.
I start to all of a sudden think like, do they think that I'm just doing that because I just said it now? Like,
Oh my
and I
gosh.
get into this stupid domino effect, and I'm like, what am I doing to myself?
Dude, 100%. I have had that experience so many times. Like, I feel like sometimes if I'm, doing something or focused on something while I'm out and about or talking with people and I just feel like really at ease, I might not really be ticking. And then somebody will mention like, "Oh, hey, I saw your videos online and stuff. I didn't realize you had Tourette syndrome." Or, and then I'm like, "Oh yeah," and of course now I start talking about it, which
Right.
triggers me to tick. But then I'm like, I'm sure they're probably thinking this is weird because we've been here 15 minutes and you haven't done that before. So yeah, it's a weird feeling in the fact that ticks can be so impressionable. You're
Yeah.
just chilling, and then all of a
Yeah.
sudden somebody mentions it, or you start talking about it, and
Right.
now
Or
you have to do it.
the subconscious suppression that I didn't even
Yeah.
realize I did so much until, again, I went to the conference, until I
Mhm.
felt myself like trying not to do it, and then realizing like, wait, I can do that
Mm.
here.
Right.
I didn't realize how subconscious my suppression became over my life.
Oh
Yeah.
yeah.
Same.
Yeah.
Very, very like without a thought kind of thing where you just realize like, oh, well, I realize that in these moments I'm always suppressing, and I
Yeah.
kind of have to sit there and evaluate. Is it really necessary right now? No, and then go ahead. Um, but
Yeah.
yeah, it's definitely a habit I try to break.
Yeah.
What's weird too is you can this sounds like it's a contradiction, but you can simultaneously be sort of thinking about suppressing and not think and suppressing without thinking about it. Like,
Yes.
Yeah.
or maybe a better way to say it would be like you can be very self-conscious of your Tourette, but sort of like, you know, beyond your awareness, be suppressing your tics.
Mhm.
And uh, I definitely realized that I did that, and being around other Touretters, definitely you could feel the contrast. And this is something people talk about too. When people with Tourette get around each other, the tics start to come out more.
Oh, yeah.
Mhm.
And I don't know if there's like a paper on that or if there's science on that, and I don't know if part of that is just the comfort level that you might feel, not
Right.
being, socially punished for ticking, or, whatever it is. But yeah, you get a lot of practice masking what you might be embarrassed for other people to see. And
Oh yeah.
I've kind of wondered, like, just if there's a way to like diagram or show a percentage of like my life that masking has like been a part of.
Mhm.
Because if you get good at that in a way, it's almost like, and it's almost like you don't have to try to get good at it. You just kind of do it. You just,
Yeah. It
you know,
becomes a learned behavior that you
mhm.
don't
Yeah.
even realize you learned how to do so well.
Right. Yeah.
Exactly. I
Yeah.
found myself masking here at home the other day, and I was like, "Why?"
Yeah.
It's me and my
Hmm.
dog.
Right.
Yeah.
At the point,
Right?
and I was
I
like, "That's weird."
swear,
Yeah.
I totally have done that where I've like
Yeah.
ticked around my cats and they've like taken note and like looked at me or something.
Mhm.
And I like feel weird about it. Like, what
Yeah.
are they thinking? What do they think that
Yeah.
was?
Right?
And yeah, and maybe it's not like a serious thought, but it's definitely a thought that like came to mind.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's wild what masking, like a
Oh,
lifetime of
yeah.
it can do to you.
And that's what I get worried about too sometimes, is because I'm so adamant with my advocacy online, and my ticks are so different when I'm at a place like work or something like that. And then I do get nervous. People will watch my videos and then they don't see me ticking like that. It's in the back of my head. Like,
Mhm.
well, why doesn't she do that here when it's just, well, one, like Janelle said, in the video, I'm literally talking about my ticks and Tourette syndrome. So it's thinking about it, it's triggering them that way. And I have a lot of facial and neck ticks. So seeing my stupid face on the camera triggers myself. And But I had somebody reach out the other day, and I'm actually going to do a video on this very soon. It's going to be out this weekend, a short one. I don't know. It might be a short one and a long one. I don't know. I might want to get more in depth. But it was somebody that I used to dance with. And a lot of people in my dance studio never knew I had Tourette syndrome because I didn't tick there,
Yeah.
because dance was that magical place for me. And she asked me, and I don't think it was coming out of she was always a nice person. So I don't think it was out of a negative space. Like I had to like shake that out of my head because I'm so
Mhm.
used to people like coming at me like, well, why didn't you do it then? But I don't
Mhm.
think she meant it this way at all. But she asked, like, is that one of those things that gets worse as you get older? She's like, because I don't remember ever seeing you do that when we danced. And so I had to tell her, I'm like, well, one, it can get worse. And yes, that's how it was for me. Yes, it got worse for me when I
Right.
got older. And two, I was like, dance was my escape. That was my happy place. Like, a lot of people didn't know. Half my teachers probably knew because they knew me since I danced there for 15 years. I danced there since I was
Oh,
3.
wow.
So
Mm.
they knew my mom. But that was my place. Like, if I was in the dance studio, it was like my body became mine again. And so I
Hmm.
had to explain that to her, and I thought it
Yeah.
was interesting, and I know she wasn't doing it as out of, like, that place, but I feel like it kind of, like, reignited that fear of mine, of people that knew me in my childhood and maybe in school and stuff. They knew I had it, but it was never
Mhm.
like this, if you will.
Right.
But that kind of also goes back, like, at my old job, I used to tell them all the time, like, "There's work Brittany, and then there is home comfortable Brittany, and they're 2 different
Mhm.
people."
Different people, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I'm a photographer, but it's also like, so that's my job, but it's also what I just love doing. And if you follow me on Instagram, occasionally you see these photos
Mhm.
of, I just take my
Beautiful
camera out and
photos,
I,
by the way.
thank
Mhm.
you. Thank you. Um, I just walk around for a couple miles or something in usually the town that I live in, but other small towns as well, and just photograph whatever looks attractive to me. And that's definitely a mental health exercise overall, but it is also a place where I'm not really thinking about Tourette. It's a with pretty much everything else. Um, I can be doing a task or doing work or something like that, and uh, be thinking about my Tourette. When I'm doing photography, it's I will say pretty much for the most part, I'm not really thinking about my Tourette. I'm just more focused on the creative, like, I don't know, just using that part of the brain, which I know is not really a scientific statement, but it's really effective and it really works, and it's the
Yeah.
one thing that really does it for me. Music kind of does it too, but um, I photographed an event last night. It was like a governmental political kind of event with mayors and city council people and House and Senate members, and like very much a suit and tie, very kind of important event. And I was the photographer there, and so I was the photographer, and I was doing the act of photography, but because of the high stakes of the situation and who was there
Yeah.
and all that, I was still very self conscious of
Yes.
my Tourette. So that would be the exception where it comes back in. But in general, doing anything artistic, mostly photography, is where I'm just kind of I feel uh, not just valued, but also just kind of free of the pressure that I feel when I'm you know walking around with someone who has Tourette syndrome,
Yeah.
or walking around as someone who has Tourette syndrome.
Right.
I should say.
Right.
Yeah. I think for me, some of the things that, those activities that kind of you don't really experience your tics as much during have shifted. I do remember at first playing the guitar, I wouldn't really tick that much, but I think it's because I was concentrating. Not not trying to brag, but I'm just saying I think I got to a point where it became second nature. I didn't have to think about it so much, then I started ticking while I was playing music. I don't know if that makes sense.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Um, and then I feel like before, if I played video games, but now again, I think I've gotten to a point in my game where I've gotten comfortable. Things are second nature that I have ticks specifically when I'm just playing video games. Those are the only
Mhm.
times those ticks
Hmm.
pop up. And then now I feel like it just kind of varies if I'm focusing on something, or like if I'm signing. I'm fluent in American Sign Language. A lot of my deaf friends didn't realize that I had Tourette syndrome because of, you know, signing. I don't know, it
Hmm.
gives your hands something to do instead of taking, I guess. That kind of has seems to be a thing that I don't really take as much. I might, while somebody's signing to me, have some like facial ticks, but not a bunch of ticks kind of pop out. So that's really cool. But I'm curious to know if either of you um, experience, I guess, any of your like co-occurring conditions that still present itself while you're doing those activities. So, like, I know Brittany, for you with dance, like, did your OCD still show up in dance class, or Ben, did your anxiety still show up while you're doing photography? I mean, of course, that event is
Yeah.
high stakes, that causes anxiety, but just in general, I'm curious if any of your co-occurring conditions with Tourette syndrome, any other
Mm.
popcorn flavors pop up. That's how I like to think of it.
Oh my goodness, I love that.
It's all popcorn, but what flavors do you have in your bag?
Man,
Yeah.
I've never thought about the co-occurring while I danced. I mean, I had my perfectionism for sure. I think that's where most of my perfectionism came from because
Mhm.
I literally got judged on being perfect on stage, basically, at
Yeah.
competitions. But man, I don't know. I really think that I was like a neurotypical person when I danced, I guess, if you will. And then, but what is kind of interesting is that my mom brought up a point couple years ago. I talk often about my foot kicking tick and I like tap my feet on the ground, and she wonders if that like almost was derived from tap dancing so much.
Oh, I could see that.
And I was like,
Hmm.
huh, I don't know, because I kind of do it in a little
Mhm.
pattern
The
almost
pattern,
because it's
yeah.
like that Tourettic OCD a little bit. And she said that once, and I'm like, I have no idea, but that's a good point. Maybe.
Hmm. Yeah.
Maybe.
It's I I got to think a little bit about that too. I do know that I mean my biggest co-occurring conditions that have had the biggest impact on my life are major depressive disorder and generalized anxiety, and and I know just sometimes people hearing stuff like that, they're like, everybody has anxiety, everybody's depressed, come on, this is not like it's a little bit different when
Yes.
you get into the major
Yeah.
depressive
It's a
disorder
little
and stuff like
different when
that. It's
it's disabling. Yeah.
yeah,
Right.
yeah, yeah, and I've definitely had a lot of experience with that. But
Mhm.
in that context, it's weird because I'm not a very imposing person. I'm not the kind of person who like walks up to people, and I'm pretty introverted. I used to be maybe less introverted at some point in my life, but these days, I'm pretty private and pretty quiet and all that. And I do get nervous in social situations, even going to the grocery store and stuff like that. I'll get flares of what if type anxiety, like what if
Yeah.
blank left blank. I don't think
Yep.
about anything specific. It's just
Yep.
like a
Mhm.
wave of like this just I mean, it really does kind of feel like a wave coming on, or like kind of like rippling up
Yeah.
anxiety when it happens. And but when I'm shooting photos, I it's like that just kind of goes away. It's like neon sign anxiety, just like you
Mm,
pull the cord and it goes off. And when
that's
I'm
cool.
photographing, and and I don't have nervousness about photographing like people, candids of people, like important people in at the thing last night,
Yeah.
um and that is a thing that I know exists in the photography community, of people being kind of timid to do that sort of thing and not wanting to be the annoying person with the camera, or upsetting somebody by shooting a photo of them in a candid situation or something like that. That stuff just kind of goes away, and I'm able to do it, and I don't really know why. It's like that specific activity. It's not like photography is a thing that exists in nature and like is part of the brain specific. I mean, it links to parts of the brain,
Yeah.
um, but I don't know why that versus much of anything else. I don't know why I have like a sort of a confidence level there, anxiety freedom there, where I don't with other things, but that is the case. And I will say, doing that type of stuff was sort of life saving activity when it came to the worst parts of dealing with depression. And it's another place where I just kind of felt like you know like I was taking a break from it, and I was in a situation where I had a bit more command or confidence in myself because it felt like I knew what I was doing or something. I don't know what it
Yeah.
was, but
Yeah. That's
that
awesome
stuff
though.
would kind of fade away when I would do those specific activities.
That's awesome. That's really cool. I feel like for me, well, sensory issues have been a thing. Like, I didn't realize it for a long time. Even working at a job where occupational therapists who deal with sensory integration work are my
Hmm.
coworkers. You know, I learned a lot, but I never realized like, oh, you kind of have some issues with textures and tactile and things touching you and all of that. But
Hmm.
that's really been a thing for me since I was a baby. With like stuff in between my fingers or certain textures. But yeah, that's still present depending on what I'm doing. Like even thinking back to guitar, like if the guitar strap was sitting in like a wrong position, it was like scratching me or something. I just had to
Yeah.
fix it. I was like, I know we're playing the song, and I'd like kind of make weird movements to try to fix it while still playing. Like yeah, that didn't just go away at all. And I feel
Yeah.
like the anxiety portion, I mean, it might have subsided, you know, if I'm focused on what I'm doing or focused on conversations with people and stuff like that. But it still was very much present. So I think for me, if if anything goes away, it's mostly my ticks. But I feel like my, you know, other flavors of popcorn, quote unquote, are still very much there.
Yeah. Yeah. And by the way, I like that you brought up sort of activity specific ticks earlier, because I have
Yeah.
this like this right button click tick
Mm.
that drives me crazy when I'm
Me
when I'm editing photos
too.
and stuff. I cannot stop it. I just at the worst times, and it like and it's not even a tick I can. Sometimes I feel it coming on, and I try not to do it, and I do it
Hmm.
anyway. But it just happens. I'm
Yes.
yeah.
Yeah, I feel that.
I have a tapping and a clicking. I do it on the computer all the time where I'll just hit the keys over and over
Hmm.
again. And I do it with my mouse too. And lately at my newer job, like when I'm putting information in for a client, I do it and I accidentally go back a screen and I lose
Yeah.
everything.
Oh no.
Oh.
Yeah, and
It's not
yeah.
as bad when I'm like just
Yikes.
writing and
Oh,
I just have a
yeah.
bunch of gibberish and I have to backspace it, but when I
Hmm.
erase the
That's my
whole
life.
oh, and I do it with, like, my
That's
plates and stuff too,
rough.
like, earlier eating dinner, I had a paper plate and I have to tap in the plate, like, that's again where my OCD crosses into it, I think,
Hmm.
because it's more of a compulsion, but I have to do it, and when I have a plate that's, like, even just the slightest bit squared, even if it's, like, it's barely a corner, you might not even
Hmm.
consider it a
Like
corner,
rounded.
I have to do it in
Yeah.
all 4,
Yeah.
and I just do it
Gotcha.
constantly. Sometimes I don't even notice I'm doing it until somebody's like, "What are you doing?" And I'm like, "Oh."
Oh. Yeah. The typing tick, which I don't even know if it's called a typing tick. I mean, I guess it's really randomly typing things, and in doing so, I have I started taking pictures. I mean, I've got a new phone since then, but they're all on my own phone. But I started taking pictures, and I was like, I'm gonna just create an album of the random things that will pop up on my screen that I don't know how I did that. One time, I had the
Yeah.
tick where I just press random stuff. And I was on like a website, right? This was not like in Word or anything. I was on the internet and emojis popped up. Like a chart of emojis on the internet
Oh, man.
popped up. And I said, I didn't even know this was a thing. I don't know how to recreate this and I don't know how to get this off. Another time when I did that, it made the words go backwards. So like if I typed or not the words, but if I typed, you know how
That
you type
happened to
like
me
left to
too.
right, it would go like right to I don't know, it was really
Yeah.
weird. And I was like, what is happening? Yeah. So
What?
That happened to me too
it's very
once.
frustrating.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely very frustrating. But I can't imagine, Brittany, the whole screen like going back and losing all your information. They
Oh,
should have like an auto
it's
save feature or
right?
something.
I just need to hit save more. You think I would
Yeah.
understand that by being a chronic saver, I like to call
Yeah.
myself, because I wrote one paper in
Yeah.
college and my computer
Mm.
completely crashed on me and I lost it all.
Yikes.
Um,
Yeah.
I am normally a chronic saver, but I don't for whatever stupid reason. Now I need to start doing it. But
Mhm.
yeah, and I've done like the stuff that I've done. I've accidentally sent friend requests on Facebook to people I don't know because I'm
Yeah.
tapping on my screen. I've
Hmm.
answered like one question surveys, like it'll pop up and it's like, thanks for answering our survey. I'm like, all right. And then like I
Yeah.
0
have
out of
to,
10.
yeah. I start following people. Sometimes so far I feel I'm pretty confident. So far I've been able to save it because thankfully it comes up like as if like if you share something.
Mhm.
I have almost shared something that would probably throw the person off because it's more of just like an acquaintance. We went to the same school, not even the same grade. And it'd be
Yeah.
like a random thing about their kid that I've never met in my life. And I accidentally share it to my Facebook. I'm like, good Lord. Like, those are the days I just think my Tourette's are just out to get me.
Yeah. Yeah. But people in the Tourette community have received um like like gifs and photos from me that nothing scandalous, but but just stuff I did not
Yeah.
mean to send
To share, yeah.
to certain people. Like I halfway blame my phone because there's like sometimes a little bit of like a delay when I tap something and then like I have to tap it
Yeah.
again, but then the screen will change while I'm actually tapping it, and then I'll hit some new thing I didn't mean to hit, and then blah blah blah. But there are definitely like Tourette related instances where I've sent content of some kind to someone I totally did
On
not mean to
accident.
send.
Yeah.
And you can unsend stuff on like Instagram, but like sometimes they just see it and
Yeah,
like
exactly.
Right.
immediately I'm like,
Or
hey, I'm
sometimes
so
they
sorry, I
see
didn't mean
that
to. And
so and so unsent something. And I'm just like,
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it makes it
The
even
struggle.
weirder. Yeah.
yeah, it does make it even weirder, I think. So that half the time, and well, and then too, I get worried if I tell people that it's that. I'm worried, and what I think well, a lot of this boils down to I need to stop worrying about what people think about me so much, but that's easier said than done.
Same.
But I
Yeah.
worry that if I
Same.
say that it was
Hmm.
my ticks, which sometimes like they make me do things, they're like, oh, I thought that wasn't an excuse to do things, blah 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 blah. And I'm just like,
I can't.
it's like at the end of the day, I can't win
Yeah.
anyways, and it's what happens. And clearly, the fact that we all relate so much to it means one, it
Mhm.
probably happens to almost everybody in the community,
Right.
so
Yeah.
it's a very real thing. But my goodness, it's so embarrassing. Like I think I accidentally sent like uh I'd like to know more, like because the businesses will have those
Oh,
message
yeah.
buttons, and it was like to
Yeah.
a plumber, and I didn't go into. I'm like, I don't know this person. I'm not going to be like, well, you see, I have Tourette syndrome, and sometimes I do this
Mhm.
thing with my fingers. So I just said, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to hit that. I don't have
Yeah.
any plumbing needs.
That is true. It's just interesting. I also feel like it kind of shifts depending on like so for example, when I was in school and I had pen and paper more, then I had more ticks involving pen and paper. But now for my job, since I'm on the computer more, then I have more ticks involving the computer. It's very,
Yeah,
very interesting
they're
dynamic of
very
how that works.
situational and impressionable, and I think that
Yeah.
goes too with people just not always understanding or wanting to believe it. Because I think that's where those
Mhm.
comments come from, like, oh, so you just now happen to do this, that, and the other. And I'm like, well, yeah, because my body saw something that it wanted to
Mhm.
do. It's like Tourette
Mhm.
syndrome is like your intrusive thoughts almost like coming to life.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But not
Hmm.
always, because I don't want to confuse that with like they are our real thoughts or anything like that.
Mm.
But it's almost like that thought that you have in your head, and they're like, "Oh, I shouldn't say that." Where my
Yeah.
Tourette's gets a thought, and it's like, "We're gonna
Yeah.
do that."
Hmm. Yeah.
Without you even being able to be like, no, no, wait, wait.
Yeah,
Just
yeah,
happens. And then you're like, well, here we are. Yeah,
Yeah,
yes,
for
and
sure.
that's important for people to hear. Who I assume most of the people listening are people in the community, but for people outside the community who might be listening to this, I mean that's sort of important to understand. Is there are people with Tourette who their tics come out as like phrases that are
hmm
traditionally very
Mhm.
offensive, and
yes,
um, in a context where someone doesn't know about Tourette syndrome, it sounds like very cancelable, material when it comes to that person. And um, the amount of times I've heard Touretters who have very uncomfortable coprolalia for them,
Mhm.
uh, them talking about how they've had to apologize to people
yeah,
for just like it's. I mean, walking into a situation where you've said something that has horrified somebody, and then you have to explain to them the whole context of here's why I didn't mean it.
Mhm.
Is that, I mean, that can like cause a meltdown. It's so much to think
Right.
about, and you're hoping you're sad you offended that person. You want them
Mhm.
to understand. You don't. It's just it's and if I don't have coprolalia, so I don't have that lived experience, but I've talked with tons of shredders on the
Yeah.
podcast who do, and have said that kind of thing. And it's I mean, that's really really heavy. And
Yeah.
in a world that's I mean, the I know sometimes people like to talk about how, like things are worse than ever and there's so much chaos out there. I mean, like, sure, but things are better than ever in a lot of ways too.
Yes.
And it's but there's still that eagerness almost, it feels like, to shut people down or cancel people
Yep.
or just one strike you're out or
Mhm.
whatever it is. And living in that kind of world or that kind of society when you have something like very difficult Tourette syndrome
Right.
is I mean, that's a tough thing to carry around.
Right. And I think what's so hard for that too, for people, I think sometimes on the outside of that, and I see this a lot from people that I talk to with coprolalia or the videos that you see, that people make advocating and stuff. And it's hard for them because they're like, "Oh, well, you saw such and such person and your Tourette's just happened to make you say this offensive term."
Mhm.
And it's like, "Well, yeah, because they were so badly hoping they wouldn't say it in that moment because they know how much more hurtful it would be in that moment."
Right.
And so now they're doing nothing but thinking about it, and that's the trigger in itself. And that's what I try to come across to people, like, just the same way, like, because when I'm in a busy area, I so badly am hoping my foot kicking ticks don't happen because I'm terrified
Right.
I'm gonna kick somebody. And you know what? That's all
Hmm.
that can happen. It's they come out full force, or I don't want to do it in a quiet room and it's just me and this one other person because
Mhm.
then I'm clearly the one making the noises and it's a quiet, comforting area or whatever it might be. And it's that much harder in having that fear, and then people on top of that not believing them, or they're getting kicked out somewhere or whatever it might be, which is a whole other topic that makes me
Yeah.
mad.
Hmm.
But we can't just like crawl in a hole and stay in our house the whole time.
Mhm.
But the way these people react sometimes, the public I don't say retaliation, but sometimes that social anxiety, it's already there for people who have something like Tourette syndrome. And then when you have that negative experience that like um is like the icing on the cake almost, it's confirming their fears,
Right.
it's gonna make it that much worse. And then like we're stuck in this rock and a hard place again, like going
Mhm.
back to not being able to win because like we want to talk about it and we talk about it and then you talk about it, well, you're not swearing so it's not real, or then you're swearing but that's not real because it's a joke, or you wouldn't talk about it if it was that difficult, or then it's you're just talking about it to get sympathy, you're just trying to make
Mhm.
money online. And I've been getting those
Yeah.
comments
Yeah.
like it's crazy how
Attention
much
or yeah.
what people will do for attention to make money. And I'm like, if you
Yeah.
think that I am making a living off of this stuff, you are insane.
Yeah. What a great idea to adopt that as a way to, make your living. you know?
Right.
Yeah.
And it's just like we constantly are in a losing battle almost.
Mhm.
And sometimes that's really motivating for me because I'm like, well, then obviously we need way more awareness. And then other times it can be like, it can be crushing, and to the wrong person. It can be soul crushing
Hmm.
and it can be so hard. And that's what I think about are these, like when I tell people like I'll delete comments like that are rude and nasty, or like especially the faking comments,
Yeah.
I don't only I not only do that for myself, but for these younger generations that are online, I don't want them reading that. I don't want them to
Mhm.
see that and be like, "Oh, well, they're going to think that about me. I'm never going to talk about this then because I don't want anybody to accuse me of that."
Right.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so,
Yeah. It sets a tone when you see comments like that. It
yeah.
furthers your um yeah, just difficulty
Mhm.
being yourself in any situation, even when you're by yourself with your cats, like in my
Right.
case. But yeah, yeah, seeing that as the narrative out there, yeah, can be really, really damaging to a young person who's really isolated, doesn't know anybody else in their community who has Tourette syndrome, like certainly not in person. Maybe they've been meeting people online, but they don't necessarily have the support at home. and then seeing,
Yeah.
stuff like that online. I mean, yeah, that would not be encouraging.
Mm-mm.
Yeah, I agree. Not at all.
It might have made me think twice when I started doing it online, I guess, because I was terrified in that realm. Like, I think it came up 2 days ago or something. It was like
Hmm.
7 years or 8 years
Oh,
since I
yeah.
posted my first YouTube video, and whew, first of all, that's a hard video for me to watch.
Oh.
It's you can tell
Why?
how you can just tell how uncomfortable I am. I mean, it's still on my
Mhm.
YouTube page. It's still up there, but you
Mhm.
can tell how uncomfortable I am. You can tell how crappy my computer camera was.
That's
I was
okay.
reading something to make sure I said everything I wanted to say, and you could see like my eyes like going back and forth. I'm like, Brittany, what were you doing? But I mean, and then when I posted it, I like shut my computer and I went to sleep, and I didn't want to
Yeah,
see
to see
anything.
people's responses and stuff.
Yeah.
And Scott got up the next morning for work, and he comes and wakes me up, and he's like, "Hey," he's like, did you see what people are saying about your video?" And I'm like, "That's all right."
Yeah. Don't
Nope.
tell me. Yeah.
And he's like, "No." He's like, "You wanna look." And I think he might have like went and grabbed my laptop. He's like, "You wanna look." He's like,
Mm.
"It's really positive." And that's all I needed to keep going. And
Yeah.
I try to remind myself of that. Jhonelle, I think you were telling me about this when you were a guest on my Tourette talk.
Mhm.
Something about like dots, like one dot or something.
Oh,
And
yeah. Yeah,
yeah.
it was I guess, an analogy that I heard from somebody talking about, just the way we view things in life, and they took a white sheet of paper and they put a dot on it, and they said, "What do you see?" And, of course, everybody's, reaction was a dot, um, and they said, "Yeah, but what about all the white space that's on the paper too?"
Hmm.
Comparing that to, like, all the, positive comments you may get, and just that one dot of,
Yeah.
like, a negative thing, then that's all you're focused on, even though there's also so much, like she's like, "Think of how many, like, white dots we could fill in on this sheet of paper." Everybody just focused on the black dot, but, yeah, that's a really good analogy that I like to hold on to.
That's
Yes.
good. I'd never heard that
Mm.
before.
Yeah. I think about it often ever since she told it to me.
Hmm.
Oh,
I use it
that's
to
nice.
like bring myself back when I'm getting
Mhm.
pulled into the depths of the negativity.
Yeah. I also I mean, for me, one thing I've tried to do, and this is just negative comments of any kind because, people don't always just talk about your Tourette syndrome, they talk about anything else. Um, Even though clearly, I'm telling you right now, clearly this is not the case. I'm not claiming that everybody has coprolalia, but in the same way, if I'm around somebody that has a tick where they say something offensive and it rolls off my back and it's not a big deal because I know that it's a tick, I pretend in my head that when I read a negative comment, I will tell myself, "Oh, that was a tick," even though I know that this
Hmm.
person is not ticking. They are intentionally sitting there saying something mean. In my head, I say, "Oh, that was a tick," because I know that if I tell myself, "Oh, that was a tick," then I'm not going to take offense to it. So that's helped
Hmm.
me out.
Okay.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah. I mean, of course, if they're, a repeat offender, then gotta go. But
Right.
if it's
I
Mhm.
always
just something ignorant, I'm like, "Oh, it was a tick."
I tell myself that it's like some 10-year-old somewhere, and I'm like, are we really gonna fight with some child?
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, sadly, some adults
Yeah.
will
That's
conduct
true.
themselves that way too.
That's very
Right.
true.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Which in reality, then they're still just a child on the internet, in my opinion. So I'm like, meh, I'm not gonna argue with you.
Hmm.
So whenever I do, like, if I like respond, I never like I might use their comment, but I never
Mhm.
do like the reply
Yeah,
to
right.
where they like I will not give you that
That
like
attention. Yeah.
attention you so desperately need. But
Hmm.
sometimes the comments they are still worth talking about
Mhm.
because it is thoughts that people have and people are so quick to tell me like, "Well, don't worry about those comments. Ignore them, ignore them, ignore them." I'm like, "Well, no, because it's still an important topic to bring up."
Yeah.
And also, I am allowed to defend myself every once in a while.
Mhm.
Like, if you think this is all that I do is think about these, like, all that I do is respond, like, there'd be so many more, first of all.
Yeah.
And it's just like I'm allowed to have that defense for myself because it's also not just for me, it's for my
Right.
community. Because, like,
Yeah.
Yeah.
my one, I think yesterday it was where somebody asked me, and I don't know their motive behind it. I don't know if they're being ignorant or not, but saying, like, well, what would you say to somebody that says this isn't real and it's just a behavioral issue or something like
Oh,
that?
that's a
And
great
I'm like,
video.
Thank you. I'm like, well, I would say that you're wrong. And people were like, well, don't give 2 minutes to this person. I'm like, well, no, because other people think this.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I'm going to talk about it. And if I have just a little bit of fun with the way that I do it, then so be it.
Mhm.
And sometimes am I a little too sassy, like the one I did with like the whole grape cure? Maybe. But I really liked that one. So
Yeah.
I don't care.
I mean, definitely see your point in that because they're like, I'm sure the things that people are saying about, or not about you, but to you or in your comments are similar things that I might get, or similar
Yeah.
things that somebody else that's
Right.
watching, content that's trying to, learn more about Tourette syndrome and find people that also have it might get. And it gives them a response to use. And that's why, I mean, it's true. And that's why I think that, you know, it's important to keep going in those things if you are somebody that's advocating, or if you're involved in stuff like what we're doing now, like getting the chance to be co-hosts of the Tourette podcast. Just thinking back to me when I was still very much like not really letting anybody know that this was something that I was dealing with, I would still be able to find comfort and support in listening to other people's stories and listening to other people with similar experiences as me. And I mean, the same how we were talking earlier about situational ticks, and it's like you found something that Ben did. You're like, oh my gosh, me too. And
Yeah.
then Ben found something I did. Like,
Hmm.
it's that feeling that you get where you feel like even though there might not be somebody that has a tick disorder that you know of, like close to you or within your circle, like you still can connect with people and see that you're not the only one dealing with it. So
Hmm.
I
Yeah.
think it's still important.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. There's a lot of comfort there. I mean, it sounds like the tiniest thing, but I mean, that's pretty huge when you have something that often comes off as something that can isolate you and, or at
Yeah.
least make you feel
Yeah.
isolated, whether it's what but, yeah, just finding like one other person who at least has the same perspective. But if you find people who have the same tick, that's a lot of fun.
Yeah. It
Yeah.
gives you like an odd sense of like excitement. Not that I like want people to feel what I feel, but at the same time I'm like, "Oh my god, somebody gets it."
Yeah.
Yeah.
Whew.
Yeah.
Like, and so like it's like a weird excitement, like a I'm not wishing it upon you, but I'm really
Mm.
happy that you get it on a very deep
Yeah.
level.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
I did want to ask Ben, did you want to add anything about like
I was gonna say the same thing.
um passing the torch, like a message, anything like that to make sure we get it in there? Because I don't want
Mhm.
it to just be like, all right, this is mine and Janelle's now.
Yeah.
Bye.
See, I was gonna see, Brittany, this is why we work so well together, because I was literally gonna say, like, Ben, are you able to say something to like kind of let people know this is not just us, guest hosting today, and then all of a sudden you're not there, and you
Yeah.
literally took everything I was gonna say. So I love it.
Yeah. No, it's I'm extraordinarily happy that we're doing this and that you were willing to do it. I mean, both of you just immediately were like, yeah, this is awesome. And even before I informed each of you who the other would be, that this is the person I've asked to be your co-host. And I think, yeah, I think you were saying, Brittany, this like John L just popped in your mind as like, I hope it's her. That would be
Yeah.
cool.
Yeah.
And that ends up being the case, that both of you are here to take it on. And I'm extraordinarily grateful for that. I'm not like disappearing entirely or anything like that. I'm still, active on social media and everything. And I still talk to a lot of Touretters on Instagram and at Ben Brown Multimedia. I think is my Instagram
Yeah, that
handle.
sounds right.
There's
Yeah.
also a Tourette's podcast Instagram, and I've been admittedly less diligent about keeping up with messages there as I have been on my personal. Either place is cool, but at Ben Brown Multimedia is where I generally continue the conversation with everybody, and I think it's probably the most important or appropriate now that I'm passing the torch on to y'all. But it's been a while, and when I said I was stepping away for or I had stepped away for health reasons, it was definitely in the mental health world, and the major depressive disorder part has always been kind of the biggest challenge for me, bigger than Tourette, bigger than really anything, and is another thing that's very difficult to explain to people because of just people's impressions of what depression means and why people
Mhm.
have it and what you should do about it. and it could get very frustrating from very well-meaning people. But when you hear like, oh, well, have you tried? And they give you
Mhm.
some like herb or something that
Yeah.
and it's gonna like it cured their friend's depression or whatever it was. And so there's a lot of that too. There's a lot of frustration, I guess,
Yeah.
communicating with the world. So it was also the kind of thing where I just, I've never really been a much of a talker about it, even with very close friends. But
Yeah.
with the amazing help of friends and family, I was able to get a lot more serious about treatment of major depressive disorder, and ended up with, I mean, this has been a lifetime of pretty much trying,
Mhm.
everything. And where I've ended up is something called, and I'll talk about this just in case anybody else has heard of it or is curious about it, or
Yeah.
I've talked to some people this treatment did not work on, but from what I hear, it has a really high success rate for something like major depressive disorder. So it's called electroconvulsive therapy. And I think when you say that, it immediately brings to mind like electroshock or something like that.
Yeah.
But this is basically where I get a friend to drive me to the hospital. Initially, I've been doing this since June 2023. Is initially 3 times a week, and then we've kind of scaled it down to where it's once a month, and I'll be doing it throughout this year. But basically, yeah, they put you under with anesthesia. They knock you out, and then they with these electric leads that they attach to you, they induce seizures. And there's something in that process that kind of and I will say it took a while for me to feel any difference. It took like 16 or
Yeah.
17 sessions of this, but
Has to take so much strength from you to keep going, wondering,
Mhm.
like,
it's
which one's gonna work and when to
yeah,
decide to throw in the towel.
and
Yeah.
it's physically exhausting too. I mean,
Yeah.
it knocks you out pretty much for the day. The next day, there's kind of a painful kind of hangover of sorts from it.
Mhm.
You
And
feel
you
like
did that
back
3
and jaw
times a
pain,
week.
and yeah, I was doing it 3 times a week initially. But after, roughly 16 or 17 sessions, I started to feel different, and I started to realize that, kind of going on from there, uh, how I felt in the context of depression continued to change to where what I identified in my brain as the feeling of, or state of depression didn't feel like it was there suddenly. And initially there was a little bit of a honeymoon period of like, yes, this is amazing. This feels like, but then it's almost like it changed me so much that that's a new thing to deal with.
Yeah.
Realizing that I've never lived without depression before, and it made so many decisions for me. It was the buffer that all the processing kind of went through,
Mhm.
and that's gone, and which is kind of led to a lot of anxiety and sensitivity about sort of my new
Yeah,
state, I guess you could say, because I
right.
really do in a lot of ways feel like a different person, and
Yeah, you're
having to
probably
reprocess
learning,
things. And
getting to
yeah,
know yourself all over again.
Yeah.
yeah, it's so much thought about identity and what's natural to me, and what,
Yeah.
who am I, what am I like, and also thinking about impressions other people might have of me that I wonder about. And that part's a bit less important, but it definitely changed the game in a lot of ways and turned a lot of dials in a lot of ways that I'm trying to learn about.
Yeah.
And but so while that challenge exists, I would never go back to what it was before. I'm
Yeah.
amazed at what this treatment has done for me. Again, I'm a patient. I'm not a
Mhm. Right.
professional. And I've talked with people who also received this treatment and it didn't work for them.
Mhm.
So I'm not saying like this worked for me, it's going to work for you if you're it. But I do think this is something that we're going to start hearing about more, maybe in media, maybe
Yeah.
as more patients go through it or see success. I've seen more coverage of things like deep brain stimulation
Mhm.
and other things that
Mhm.
are, and when something like the New York Times covers a treatment like that, a lot of people read it and subsequently ask their doctors about it, and may
Right.
increase the line for something like that, or
Right.
increase the popularity for a treatment like that. So we may hear, I think, more about this at some point. But I had heard about it, but I didn't know anything about it. So it was essentially new to me when they recommended that as a treatment, which again is going to continue through this year. But because of all that, that's one of the factors. In addition to wanting to kind of change the voices on Tourette's podcast and give somebody else a turn to to do the driving and ask the questions and bring their own perspective. Because if it's just me all the time, I mean, I don't know, but I like the fact that we have more voices on here now. And so I'm not backing out completely or disappearing completely. I'm still going to help with some things with Tourette's podcast and still be, active in terms of communicating with everybody. But I'm uh, doubling it up is just taking some time to take more care of myself and also wanting to add voices. I think this is a really, really great thing we're doing, really great outcome for me. And I think it's going to benefit the community a lot.
Yeah, I'm definitely honored that, I was even considered to help out with this because, I mean, I know I've spoken about it before, but I'm still, I guess, in comparison to other people, I'm still pretty new-ish, I guess, to this thing. Not really receiving my diagnosis um, until 2021, even though I've had it much longer, but not really talking about it until then either. So, um, just to be able to have that opportunity is definitely an honor. So I appreciate it, and I know that, of course, yeah. I was like, I can't do this by myself. I need somebody else. Please, like Brittany would be great. And I know with her experience, and we have a lot of similarities, but we also have a lot of differences too, in the way we've handled or dealt with or experienced Tourette. So I think it'll be really cool. I'm excited for it.
Yes. Same. I'm so honored, and I've learned a lot from Jhonelle and you, Ben. Like, it shows like the different voices, they are important because we all have different lived experiences with Tourette syndrome. And so,
Yeah.
because I always tell people like and that's when I started doing those Tourette talk videos, which you were my first guest, Ben, on those.
That's cool.
uh, I know that not everybody will always connect with my Tourette story, and that's fine. But they might connect with that next person I talk to. And
Mm-hmm.
that's what's important. They might see themselves in Jhonelle instead of me. And I hope they do, because I know she's probably a role model for so many people, as well as you, Ben. And they just might not connect. Not that they don't like me or whatever. And maybe they don't. That's fine too. Whatever. But it just,
Impossible.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Not likely.
But it's just the difference, like we have those different stories. Like, you opened my eyes to our completely different lived experiences, and um really made me think about things in different ways and stuff like that. And I won't get too much into it because it's a topic I definitely want us to talk about in an episode. But on the one that you and Michael came on, the Tourette
Yeah.
talk, like, you guys, like, I feel like just blew my mind with a lot of stuff, and I feel ignorant for saying that in a way that I didn't think about it in that lens before.
Mm-hmm.
But that's because I didn't have that lived experience. And so that's what just,
Yeah.
yeah. Long story short, I'm really happy to be here, and I'm really
Mm-hmm.
excited to keep learning more from everybody else.
Woo!
Well, this has been great. I love how we started this off, and I guess I guess we'll sign off, and y'all will be talking with the community, and
Yeah.
I'm excited to listen.
Yeah.
Yes.
Talking with community and talking about different topics and all kinds of stuff. So I'm
Yeah.
excited.
Me too.
All right. Well, thanks, y'all.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
See you guys later.